In the summer of 2020, I secretly moved out of my parents' house, and if you're wondering what I mean by secretly, just keep watching. Hi, I'm Essie. Welcome back or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're good. If you're thinking, something looks different around here, well, you're right. I have just recently changed my channel name from The Essie Report to Essie's Interlude, just because I feel it better reflects and represents where I am at personally, but also where and what my channel is going to be about, especially going forward. Therefore, I thought what better way to kick things off than with this video, which is kind of like a story time, and I hope will also act as a bit of a get to know me. I've really tossed and turned about how best to tell this story, and it still won't be perfect because I'm not perfect, but also because parts of it are quite difficult and have been a little bit traumatic, but also because it's been 2 years since this whole decision that I made. So I'll try my best and let's see how it goes. If you notice me looking over in this direction, that's because I've kind of got my iPad set up behind the camera just so I can see the kind of points I've laid out for myself to cover, because we are going to be here for a little while. So buckle up. I hope you've got a drink, get some water, get some tea, get some wine, get some whatever you need, get it and sit down. If you feel like in some way, for some reason, whatever it may be, you are living a double life, this video is first and foremost for you, to let you know that you're not alone and to let you know that I see you. I've been there and I see you. Maybe you've come across my TikToks or my reels in the past at the time where it was kind of going viral, but this is my story up until now and with hindsight. Let me start off by saying that I was born into a church that prided themselves in preaching the Bible from cover to cover, not taking anything out, not putting anything back in, and living accordingly, okay? And faith-wise and culturally, my parents were very strict, from the clothing to their skepticisms on other churches to the fact that they believed as Nigerians, let me not speak for the whole of Africa, if a child is behaving badly, you should punish them by beating them, to the fact that to them mental health wasn't a thing, depression wasn't a thing, anxiety wasn't a thing, getting help wasn't a thing. They attributed all things mental health to demons and spirituality and spiritual problems and, you know, all sorts of things like that. Now, in the midst of this, I obviously was really struggling, and I was struggling obviously mentally, but also just generally with, you know, the fact that I felt like I didn't have my own sense of identity. I wasn't allowed to find and discover it in so many different ways. And so as I got older, I just longed for a way to express myself and discover myself. And because I knew I couldn't do it, I started looking for ways in which, or to understand ways in which other people had arrived at the point where they felt like they knew who they were. I started writing blogs, I started an Instagram, and each time any of these were discovered, even Pinterest, disappear. It would disappear, it'd be taken down, I'd be punished, that sort of thing. And it's not like I was doing anything bad. I never have been the kind of person that just wants to go crazy and, you know, wants to go out clubbing or just wants to get drunk. It wasn't that. I wasn't that kind of kid. I never had that kind of desire. My desires and interests were in creative things, in fashion, in photography, in how the world works, what life is like for other people, in art. I wanted to go to museums and cafes and all of those sorts of things which are normal things, were the things I was interested in, but the things that were frowned upon and very much misunderstood by my family. Mufti days, Mufti days were the worst. In general, going to anywhere that wasn't church or school was the worst, because I had no nice clothes, I had no cool clothes. I had church clothes and home clothes, and both of those were not cool. They weren't what I would see other people wearing, you know. Everything was below the knee and very modest. And so when it came to Mufti days, best believe I would be scheming and planning how I was going to get from home to school and back, whilst changing on street corners and hiding behind bushes, and in the meantime praying that nobody from church saw me on the way. And then there was just ridiculous things like, you know, having things confiscated that weren't even, they had no right or real reason to be taken off of me. I remember like I'd bought a pair of glasses, just regular glasses, not prescription, even though I did have a pair of prescription glasses. And my dad just one time like taking them off me, and I remember asking him like why, like what was wrong with a pair of glasses, and he had no answer, no good reason to confiscate. And I didn't see these glasses, well I did because I knew where he hid them, but I didn't see them for like 3-4 years. I remember like things like perfume being taken off of me, like just confiscated, and it's like, what is unholy about perfume? I think some of the more like upsetting things were journals. So I remember having to take my journals to school because I knew that he would read them, and obviously that was the only place I could like express myself. This was before writing blogs. So I'd always be taking my diaries to school because he just didn't believe in the idea of having anything written down. Like he felt that, you know, if you had a problem, you should talk to your family about it, that sort of thing. So I didn't have kind of my own space to just live, breathe, take a breath. I remember as well, like I'd gone to H&M, and I think it was money that I had gotten. It was maybe my own money from like my birthday or something. I think it was like £20 or £10 that I gotten to spend on whatever I wanted. And I remember that I had gone to H&M and bought one of those like wide brim hats. I literally have one, hang on. So I'd gone to H&M and bought a hat just like this one. And it took me forever to decide on what I wanted to buy with that money. So I bought this and I brought it home, and I was so like happy with my purchase, my decision, and I hung it in my bedroom on a nail in the wall. And the next day he comes and says to me like, it's not like it's a man's hat, and basically that I should return it. And I was so upset, and I remember trying to argue with him like, what do you mean it's a man's hat? Like I bought it in the women's section. This is a woman's hat. Like it's trying to reason with this person. And then more like upsettingly as well, books, like books became banned. Reading, I was banned from reading for like 3 years. From a very, very young age, English was my best subject. I loved reading. Before I started journaling, I was reading like from like 5 years old. I loved reading fiction books, and like the libraries at school were like my favorite place. And I remember it just became a thing where like I would bring books home from school, and they would be taken off of me, they would disappear, and my parents didn't like the books I was reading. Again, I was never reading anything violent or aggressive. Like I didn't even read books with magic in it because I already knew that wasn't going to be allowed. It would just be like teenage girl books. The girls went to the mall, or Tracy Beaker books, like nothing that deep. Over time, each time I brought books home from the library, my dad would have an issue with the book because he felt like it kind of left a bad impression on me. And so I stopped reading because books kept disappearing, and I didn't have a way to explain to the librarian what was going on. So I just stopped reading altogether because it was too painful to keep bringing books home and stories home that I loved, and I would never finish because I'd never see the book again. So many times that things of mine would just be cut up in front of me because they weren't allowed. There was so much that you just couldn't do. Like, I couldn't wear trousers. The only time in my life that I was allowed to wear trousers was for PE. And I remember the first day of secondary school, my school uniform was boys, girls, no matter, you had to wear trousers. It was trousers, no skirts were allowed. And first day of year 7, my parents sent me to school in a skirt. And everyone, and I kid you not, everyone would stare at me. And I remember like girls from like the older years like coming up to me like, did you know that you're not allowed to wear skirts to school? And I'm like, oh really? Even though I knew for a fact that was the rule. So that's kind of like how things were growing up. And obviously in that space of time as well, my mental health was just always, before I even knew what depression was, I was depressed. I had actually secretly tried to kind of get what was called counselling from my GP, but when my parents found out, it was a wrap. Like, they never saw me again. And that was really painful as well, because that was when I realized that they didn't believe in mental health. They didn't believe in the fact that I was struggling and that they were the cause of it. Because of all of this, I felt like I didn't really know myself. I didn't have a sense of identity. I wasn't really allowed to explore. I remember at school, I'd heard about a photography club, and one day after school I stayed a little later. I can't remember the excuse I gave my mum, but I went to the photography club. Please tell me why, when I got home, my mum pulled me to the side and was like, why the hell did you go to the photography club? This and that. Like, I got in trouble for going to the club. Come to find out that because I had gone, the teacher in charge of the club had like rang my mum to tell him I was now attending this club. And I was there thinking, like, I was really angry with the teacher. Like, why would you do that? Do you not see what I'm going through? Do you not understand? Anything I could get my hands on, magazines, catalogs, that type of thing, like fashion related, it just made me so happy. And I remember I like started cutting out some of like the outfits and clothing that I liked. This was in the time where like you would get like a Next catalog sent home, or a Littlewoods catalog sent home. So I remember me and my sister, we would take a catalog each, and when my parents went home, we'd like go through the pages and like circle with highlighters. We would circle with highlighters all the things we wanted, from like right from like the women's wear section all the way down to toys. And that was really like our fun thing to do. So anyway, I started like cutting out some of the outfits I really liked, and like just things that I just thought were gorgeous, like makeup and things like that, and I would stick them to the inside of my wardrobe door so it wasn't like hidden. I came home and my mum was like, what's that? And she just started like ripping it down, like just ripping it down. And I was just like, why do we have to, what is this? Why are we like this? Why can't we just yeah. I remember Justin Bieber just started becoming famous, and I was hearing about him, but like nobody else at school was really hearing about him, so I started talking about him to like some of the other girls at school. And it's not like I even like fancy Justin Bieber or like whatever. I was just really like kind of excited that there was a very young person becoming very popular in Hollywood who could sing, and yeah, was a bit cute, but it wasn't even about that for me. It was just like I found someone whose music I liked, so it's not like I idolized him or anything. But anyway, I printed out a picture of him at school and came home and stuck it up on my wall. Oh my god, it rained like hellfire. Like the telling off I got, it was just the one picture. There was nothing else really on my wall. It was just one picture of Justin Bieber, and I don't think it stayed up for at least 24 hours. I don't think it stayed up for up to 24 hours. That's the kind of like things that would happen all the time. So as I got older, I started to, instead of putting things around my room physically or in places that they could easily see and find, I started to kind of just, you know, go more into the digital space. And I had blogs, several blogs. If I couldn't have a sense of identity, talk to other people, young people who seem to have one already, all of that is a kind of synopsis as to what like growing up in my childhood was like. My only hope, prayer and desire was to get out. I could not wait to go to uni. I grew up dreaming, praying, counting down the days to the moment I could taste some freedom and find my people and kind of get away from this just ridiculous, overprotective, overstimulating, depressing bubble that was my childhood. Let's just say that my expectations of uni versus the reality, they never met. They never hung out. The expectations, they never materialized. I think one of the few things that actually got me through was having had to go through the really tough experience of childhood and not really have anyone or any way of expressing myself, meant that I'd learn to be very independent and learn how to cope with not being able to have people around or friends that I could talk to who could support me and relate to me. It took right up until the very last couple of months for me to seek help mentally, because my parents had kind of affected and influenced my perspective of what mental health was and what getting help meant. Towards the end of my last year of uni is when the pandemic hit, and so I have to say that even though for a lot of people it was a really difficult time, for me it was one of the best things that has ever happened to me. I always wanted to have my own Depop shop. I threw myself into like creating my first collection, my first drop on Depop, everything that I wish I could own, and all the different types of clothing and fashion that I was interested in, I poured into this Depop shop. But then that obviously had to come to a close because I moved back home that summer. It was such a struggle. I was at home with no job, trying to get to grips with how the hell to exist in this space after 3 years of not having to. One of the first big clashes after moving back in was over my Depop shop, which I had tried to keep a secret for a little while, but over time my parents started noticing. For about 2 months, I don't think I slept properly just because of the amount of drama that was happening because I had this Depop shop. It was such a big deal. They really didn't approve of the fact that I was modeling the clothes. They didn't approve of the fact that I was selling clothes because they didn't agree with fashion. They especially didn't agree with the fact that some of the clothes I was selling was trousers, because it was something I wasn't allowed to wear. And I remember that was kind of the beginning of me starting to take a stand on what I thought, how I felt, who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I kind of ended up saying to them, look, I'm gonna keep running this shop whether you like it or not. My only compromise is I will not sell trousers. And so that was the only reason I was able to kind of keep my Depop shop going. But I definitely would still hide a lot of the things I would source from my Depop shop. A lot of the items I feel like they definitely wouldn't and didn't approve of. So I was still kind of like secretly like going to the post office, secretly like picking up the things I'd sourced and like hiding them in all these like places around my room that were kind of not that obvious. It all just was so much all the time. And I remember saying to my best friend at the time, like, there has to be somebody else somewhere who's experiencing this level of insanity as I am, just saying something about it on Instagram. And back then it was just like, I had less than 1,000 followers, and majority of them were people I knew from school. So it wasn't like I was anybody big. I remember it was in April of 2021, I think. I'd had enough and I'd gone and made a video. And my thing was, I didn't really care if only one person saw it. I just wanted to know that I wasn't the only one. I just wanted one person to say to me, I am experiencing the exact same thing. I know what it's like. I know what you're going through. I posted that video. I left my phone, and then like 2 hours I came back and I opened Instagram, and the video was just like thousands and thousands and thousands of people had watched this video. And I remember like from April till like August, I'd gone from less than 1k followers to 14k followers. And I'd also made a TikTok because somebody had said, oh, why don't you post it on TikTok? And it was insane. Like, I'd only hoped for one person, just one person, to tell me that they could relate to what I was saying. And turns out I wasn't the only one. Every single day I would get like hundreds of DMs of people either sharing their story with me or, you know, telling me that they felt for me. It was incredible. There's no other word for it. It was just crazy. Luckily, in July of 2021, I finally had a breakthrough and I got my very first proper graduate job. I could finally begin thinking about how I was going to move out and what that would look like. Now, at the beginning of 2021, my family had started talking about wanting to move from the house I had grown up in. And in general, I was kind of completely against the move, but my parents didn't really care for mine and my sister's opinion. They kind of were determined they wanted to move, so they were going to move. And although they were saying they were going to move, because this topic of moving house had like come up so often over the years, I'd stopped believing in the possibility of it actually happening. But now it was July and they were saying to me, oh, by August we're going to be out of this place. I couldn't, like, the idea of moving with them like made me feel like stone. Like I could not see myself moving into this new house with them. Like that would be the end for me. I wouldn't be able to ever have a chance of living by myself and living by my own rules and not being bound to their idea of what they thought life is. I remember not being able to sleep because in my head I was just trying to formulate a way in which I could move out to my own apartment, which is something I had always hoped for and dreamed about, without any hassle, without any problems. And I knew that there was just no way in hell they would allow me to do that. The move was planned for a Saturday, and I think on the Thursday I was so overwhelmed with everything. I remember after work sneaking out to go to my favorite restaurant, and I sat there because it was like 5:30. There was nobody else in the restaurant, and I sat there and I took my I think I took my like notebook with me, and I drew up a pros and cons list of why I should or shouldn't move out. And by the time I was done with my dinner, I looked at the list and I just said to myself, there are so many more pros on this list than cons, and if I'm going to make a decision, I just need to do it. I just need to go and be brave, regardless of what kind of drama would ensue. And so Thursday night, I go home and I'm looking online at apartments and like bedrooms, like anywhere that I can just stay. And I remember I go on spareroom.com. I think it's called Spare Room. I'm scrolling for about 10-15 seconds and I come across this listing for this room in a shared house, and as soon as I saw it, I kid you not, as soon as I saw it, I was like, that is the one, that is the room I'm moving into. My heart dropped, and that's how I knew that that was the right place for me. I I sent a message on Spare Room to the landlord, and I was like, no, I think his phone number was on the listing, and I messaged him. It was like late at night, I think like it was midnight, and I texted him and I said to him, I'm going to ring you at 8 o'clock in the morning because I want a viewing for this room. And I remember like the guy texted me just before 8 and saying like, oh, really sorry, I'm not going to be able to do a viewing tomorrow, maybe on Monday. And I said, oh hell no. Like, I was like, that isn't gonna run, baby. My parents are moving out on Saturday and I do not have a place to live. I remember texting him like, I'm really sorry, like this is important, can you please squeeze me in before then, like I need to see this place. And suddenly like he just changed his tune and he was like, okay, there's 5:30 work. And I was like, yep, like 5:30 I'll be there on the dot. 5:10 I was waiting outside. Tell me why by 5:30 I am standing back outside of the place with the keys in my hand. It was the most surreal experience. As soon as I walked into the room, I was like, yeah, like I would have taken that place without even seeing the rest of the house or seeing the room itself. What the hell just happened? Like, how has my life just changed in the space of like 30 minutes? It was like it felt like a dream. That room was just everything that I wanted. It was perfect. I loved that room. Everything was just falling into place. Oh, everything was just so good. All that needed to happen now was for me to move. I'm gonna need to explain that I'm not going to be moving in with them, but at the same time I know for a fact that if I did explain to them, me moving into the new place just wouldn't happen. The morning comes, it's Saturday morning, so while my mum is kind of sorting out the whole moving process and packing things up and putting it into boxes, and people from church are coming in and out of the house and loading it up into their vehicles, I'm like, there's a window of opportunity here. I'm calling my own vehicles and cabs to come pick me up from around the corner of the house, and I get in the cab with my stuff, take it up to the new place and walk back down, because the new place was only about 10 minutes away from the house we lived. So by like the third or fourth trip, I was exhausted. And I remember I just decided to kind of pause because I don't even think I'd eaten the whole day. So I think I ended up falling asleep at the new place. And so when I woke up, it was evening, and I was like, crap, like, okay, I need to move like the rest of my stuff. At this point, like, I didn't really care because I was like, what are you gonna do, kick me out? So my intention was to like grab some of my other like stuff and just kind of say like, I'm sorry, but I'm moving out. But it didn't work like that. It really didn't work like that. It was like a volcano erupting. That's how like I would explain it. The biggest confrontation I have ever experienced. I just confronted and said everything that had always been on my mind. I said, nah, no more, like I can't do this anymore. And I stormed out and I never looked back. So obviously I've been documenting like my whole journey up until that point on social media, and a lot of people were, you know, being supportive and were always checking up on me, and a lot of people had even offered up their own houses or places that I could go to. It was really hard to cope with everything that was going on, but also consistently through it all make content. And I had to choose basically between my mental health and continuing to make content whilst trying to figure out how to deal with all of the drama that was coming at me from my family, friends, church members. Like, my phone would not stop ringing. Everybody was trying to talk sense into me. Everybody was just giving me their own opinion constantly. I spent so much of my time blocking people. I kind of made a decision to like slow down on trying to make content about the topic and the situation whilst I was in it. I'd created a space for double lifers, and whatever the situation was, I felt like I was a representative of those people who felt like they were alone, and suddenly I had dropped off the face of the earth and then was coming back to say like, oh, by the way, I'm still alive, this is me, this is what's been going on. I just kind of felt like nobody cared, nobody wanted to know, even though people would regularly tell me that wasn't the case. It was hard to get over that. I think overall it just became harder to show up in the spaces and platforms that I had created, because I felt and still feel like I owed it to a lot of the double lifers to hear them and represent their struggle and their experience, and candidly document the fact that life after leaving such a oppressive environment gets better. This channel going forward is all about me getting back on board and getting back to the plan that I have for myself, getting back to my own hopes and my own dreams, and just discovering, like I always said I would, who I am and what it is I want for myself. Thank you so much if you have been watching and listening up until this point. I really appreciate it. If you are someone who has a story similar to mine or can relate to this in any way, I just want you to know that it's okay, things will turn out okay, and you are not alone. And if you are interested in seeing how things go for me as an ex-double lifer, please feel free to subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, share with me your own experience or your own thoughts or whatever you feel like you're struggling with, and let's just rebuild that community of people who long for freedom and deserve it, and by all means will get it.